charge group theory and introduction to conflict checking. So this is going to be focused purely on armory because that's where charge group theory and conflict checking is appropriate. It occurred to me I didn't have a good class on this, and I figured since I know about charge group theory and how to conflict check, I should make a class for it. So this is being recorded, so hopefully this is helpful to people out there in the future, and I plan on expanding this and being available to teach it as needed in the future. So, come on. Okay, so this is going to be based purely on an understanding of how to lay the fundamental groundwork on how to understand how we check for conflict, and also then how to do that conflict checking. So we're going to start from first principles. This is going back to the basics. I'm going to intentionally omit some advanced topics, and there's going to be nuances and corner cases in the rules. I'm not going to talk about IAPs at all. We'll also assume that the armory that is being submitted has no style problems. So you should always make sure that anything you are that you have been asked to conflict check, or if you're consulting and your submitter has shown you armory, or you are trying, you're working with them, make sure that it is free of style problems before you conflict check. That's your first step. We're also, and I'm going to say this a couple times throughout, we're not going to cover the complex search form. This is going to be, you need to understand the first principle, the basics of how we get to this point before you can graduate to the complex search form. That is an advanced topic. So there are some prerequisites for this class. I will say this up front. You should have basic familiarity with the rule of tincture. You should have an understanding of heraldic design concepts. And I'm not really going to go into blazon here. I'm just going to use the blazon for things. So if you have questions, feel free to speak up. But this class does kind of assume that you have a working knowledge of blazon. So, charge group theory. The armory in the SCA, our understanding of armory in the SCA is built around the idea of charge groups. So we have no way of knowing how historical people, medieval and early modern people, thought about heraldic design. We have some treatises. I haven't really read them. I don't think they refer to charge groups as a thing. This is a way for us as modern heralds to conceptualize the design principles that underpin how armory was constructed in period. So we talk about charge groups, and our breakdown of how those are put together, we call charge group theory because heralds are nerds. Cena Appendix I is a discussion of charge group theory with a bunch of examples. I'm going to cover it sort of as a top level, but if you want to go into more detail with specific examples, Cena Appendix I will cover that. So what's a charge? A charge is an item which is placed on a piece of armory. It's a thing that is in armory that is not the field. So there is a distinction between a field division. So you can do a bunch of different fun things with the field. The field is treated differently than charges. If you think of it as a layering, you have the field, which is the ground level, and then every charge you put on top of it builds on that layer. And that is probably a useful way to think through this that I didn't really structure in this class. So if I redo this class, I'll include the layering example in a bit more detail. So a charge group, a charge is a single thing. And in my armory here in the top right, there are 3 eagles. Each one of those eagles is a charge. However, those 3 eagles together form a charge group. A charge group is a set of charges that form a single design unit, basically. They fall into standard arrangements, and we'll talk about those arrangements as we go through the class. What is a primary? What is a secondary? What is a tertiary charge group? But it is important to note that a single charge group consists of one or multiple charges. So you can have a charge group of 1 charge, and you can have a charge group of 6 charges. You can have a charge group of dissimilar types. So you can have 1 charge group that contains multiple types of charges. Generally speaking, 2 is your max. 3 you get into, if you have a charge group of 3 or more kinds of charges, then you're starting to get into what we call slot machine heraldry, and that is probably going to be grounds for return. So I've got some examples. There's this class is sort of interspersed with examples that are either consults I've done in the past or examples I've just brained up. So going from left to right, we have, this is a primary charge group of a single charge. It's a vol, which is it's a wing that is conjoined at the center. So that is a primary charge group of one charge. In the middle, we have, this is a charge group of three of the same charges, just like in my armory, there's 3 lions. And in the far right, this is a charge group which consists of 2 types of charges. The octopi and the grenade in base all form, those are a single unit of charges that has been placed here. This is we'll talk about, we'll go into more detail on primary charge groups here in a second, but these together form a single charge group, a single primary charge group, consisting of 3 individual charges and 2 types of charges. So we're going to go through what are the charge groups. So first off is primary charge group. I have a lot of links to Cena in here. I'll post a link to the slides after this and also in the Discord. But this is a link to Cena Appendix I1, which is primary charges. So the primary charge is a charge which exists directly on the field in the visual center of the shield. Most armory has a primary charge group. The exception is if there are certain types of designs you'll see at the very bottom here with under the some rules section, armory with no primary charge, we say it's field primary. And there are specific examples of that, which I'll talk about here. Generally speaking, the primary charge is the largest charge on the field that dominates the center of the armory. Central ordinaries are always the primary charge. If there are no ordinaries, the central charge on the armory is the primary charge. Peripheral ordinaries cannot be the primary charge. If you have an armory with only peripheral ordinaries, that's field primary. And if there's no central charge group or ordinary, but if there are other non-ordinary charges that are on the periphery of the armory, they are the primary charge group. So armory is very much a thing where we need visual examples. So I'll have a lot of slides with a lot of text and then visual examples to follow. So here we have some examples of primary charge groups. These are all primary charge groups with charges. I don't have any field primary armory on here. I've got some later though. So in the top left, we have, this is a primary charge group of a single charge. It's just a chimera. Immediately below it, we have a primary charge is the bend. There are no secondary or any other charge groups. These are only primary charges here. Top right, we have 6 martlets. So that is a primary charge group of 6 types. And in the bottom right, we have an example. There is no central charge on the field, but there's no ordinary. And so the 3 mullets in chief constitute the primary charge group on this armory. So after primary, we have secondary charges. Secondary charges lie on the field, but around the primary charges. So you have two if you have a field primary armory, you can have secondary charges, which are usually ordinaries around it. But generally speaking, if there are no ordinaries, you can't have a secondary charge unless there is a primary charge. They are generally smaller than primary charges, and you can have multiple groups. And we'll, after we go through all the individual types of charge groups, we'll have worked examples where we'll talk through different examples where we look at armory and diagnose, okay, what are the groups on this armory? So some specific examples: all peripheral ordinaries, chiefs, borders, orals, flaunches, bases, points pointed, gores, cantons, those are all secondary charge groups. Cotises, which are parallel lines, which parallel ordinaries, specifically central ordinaries, so primary charges, those are secondary charges. And we'll talk about maintained charges later. We'll talk about held charges, but maintained charges are always secondary. So here's armory with varying degrees of secondary charge groups. So we'll go clockwise from top left. So this is armory which has no central primary charge. Instead, it has an oral, which is the white line. An oral is a peripheral ordinary. So this is field primary armory with a secondary oral. Next, we have a primary bend, with 2 green trefoils. The trefoils are secondary because they lie on the field and are not, they are around the primary charge. In the third example here, the primary charge is the foxglove flower, and the flaunches, the green sort of semicircles coming from each side, those flaunches are secondary charges. Those are peripheral ordinaries. Going clockwise, bottom right, we have 3 owls. Those are the primary charge group. And the sparks, so the groups of 3 dots, this is ostensibly, the sparks are a secondary charge group. This is a semi, ostensibly short for semi of sparks. So this is a secondary charge group which lies on the field around the primary charge group. In the bottom center, we have the primary charge is the 3 braced chevronels through the center. And here you have a single secondary charge group consisting of the snake in chief and the compass star in base. Those 2 form collectively a single secondary charge group. And in bottom left, you have a central ordinary, the chevron, and the red lines offset from the chevron. Those are cotises. So this is ermine, a chevron cotised gules. The cotises are a secondary charge group. So tertiary charge groups, these are pretty easy. They are charges on top of other charges. They don't lie on the field. Definitionally, the tertiary charge group cannot lie on the field. Any charge group can have tertiary charge groups on it, unless they're maintained charges. We'll talk about held charges later. And you can have multiple types of tertiary charge groups on different charges. So here's some examples. This sorted weird, but we're going to go again clockwise from top left. So here you have a pall, so the red Y shape in the middle, that's the primary charge. You have a group of secondary charges, so the red roundels on the field, those are secondary. And there are 2 tertiary charge groups here. So the crosses crosslet, so the yellow crosses on the pall are tertiary because they are charges which sit on top of the pall. And the spur rowels, so the pierced white stars on top of the red roundels, those are also tertiary charges. They are charges on top of the secondary charge group, the secondary roundels. Everything else here just has a single example. Actually, no, there's another example in here with 2 tertiary charge groups. But again, going clockwise, so we have a bend, the 6 mullets on top of the bend are tertiary. Top right, this is another case of field primary armory where the bordure is a peripheral secondary. The bordure has the white lozenges on it. Those are the tertiary charge group. Bottom right, the chief has a sheaf of arrows. Those are tertiary. Bottom center, the 3 frogs lie on top of the chevron. Those are tertiary. And in bottom left, you have 2 tertiary charge groups here. This is a vert field, an or cross, so yellow cross, and a yellow bordure. The cross has an olive branch on it, and the bordure has blue billets on it. So the 2 tertiary charge groups here are the olive branch and the billets. All right, quaternary charges. We're going to talk about this quickly, but I want to use it to illustrate a point. A quaternary charge is a charge on top of a charge on top of a charge. So it's a charge placed on top of a tertiary charge group. They are not allowed. And the exception here is individual attested patterns, or IAPs. I'm not going to talk about how to do an IAP or really much about beyond what they are. An IAP is how you say, the armory I want is historical and I'm going to prove it. So it's, if you want to break the rules, you have to submit an IAP for how you are breaking the rules. They are a pretty high bar to get an IAP through. We're not going to talk about them here. That's a very advanced topic. If you can document them through an IAP, you can have quaternary charges. And also augmentations of arms are allowed to break certain rules, including the limit on layering. So we have an example here, top right, where you have an ore field, a primary fess, so the sable fess. The fess has 3 plates, so 3 white bezants on it. Each of those white bezants has a gules furazon, which is a fire striker on it. The fess is primary, the plates are tertiary, and because the furazons lie fully on top of the bezants, they are quaternary charges. This armory would be returned for violating the layer limit. However, the specific note I want to mention for quaternary charges is you cannot blazon yourself out of a conflict. We'll talk about that later, but you can blazon yourself out of a style problem. So if you can come up with a plausible blazon for the armory that you are presenting, that does not have the armory as quaternary, as that does not have a quaternary charge group, it's allowable. So a good example of this is, this is a Vert field with a with a fimbriated sable pale. So fimbriation is a heavy outline on ordinaries or simple geometric charges like delfts and billets and mullets. So you can fimbriate simple geometric charges, but they have to be the primary charge. But you could also blazon a fimbriated ordinary, for example. This if you were to ignore the mullets, the stars, for example, this could be Vert, a pale argent charged with another sable, in which you'd have an argent pale as the primary charge and the sable pale as a tertiary charge. And if you were to blazon it that way, then the mullets would then be quaternary. But you could also blazon this as Vert, a pale sable coteased on a pale sable fimbriated two mullets argent, mullets of 8 points in this case, in which the sable pale is primary with fimbriation. In that case, the fimbriation does not count for difference. But the two mullets on it are then tertiary charges and not quaternary. So that's allowed. So you can blazon yourself out of a style problem. So overall charge groups are not super common. These are charges they lie on the field and considered to lie on the field for purposes of contrast, but they cross the center of the field and they lie partially on the field and partially on top of other charges. They must overlie the primary charge, and in almost every case, either the overall charge or the charge it overlies is an ordinary or something long and skinny like a spear. Labels are an exception, and peripheral ordinaries in certain circumstances are an exception, and more on that on the next slide. They must have a significant portion on the field. If there's just a little bit of overlap from the primary charge under the field, that's called barely overall. That is not registerable. Those will be returned. There can only ever be one overall charge group. You can't have more than one overall charge group. So what do overall charge groups look like? Here's 4 examples. So top left, argent field, primary sable fess, and overall ghoul's antelope. So the ghouls it has, for purposes of contrast, it lies on top of the argent field, but it lies on top of both the field and the sable fess. So it is an overall charge. Top right, and here you have it reversed. You have a primary animate charge, in this case, an owl displayed, with an overall fess. And you actually, the most common way, and you see it in Italian armory pretty regularly, is an single animate charge on the field with an overall fess or an overall bend. Overall pales are somewhat rare, but overall fesses, overall animate charges are not uncommon in Italian armory. And then there's a set of tertiary horns. In the bottom left, we have, this is my armory. The label is a charge which is used in period heraldry to denote someone's heir. So my eldest child would bear my arms differenced with a label. This is the English tradition, especially. And I didn't want to assign anyone else's armory having a child, so I used my own. So this is my armory with an overall label in chief. Usually labels are kind of a special case. They're almost always in chief. You do sometimes see labels as a charge in their own right. So you'll see sometimes labels, you'll say ghouls 3 labels argent. So that's a thing you can do. In this case, the label is throughout, which means it extends to the side of the field. But it is overall. It lies both on the field and on the top of my eagles. And bottom right, this is the one example. I said peripheral ordinaries in certain circumstances. This is, I think, the only one. Although, don't quote me on that. There might be other cases. This is the one I definitely know of. And this is a field with a vert bordur, and an overall chief. So the chief is overall on the bordur. So there are 3 different ways to combine a chief and a bordur. And in this one is blazoned as this would be, for example, Paley, ghouls, and or a bordur vert overall, a chief purpur. So these are all 3 examples of overall charges. So held charges. This is kind of you see them a lot, especially in society heraldry. They are less common in period heraldry, but they do exist. These are charges which are held by other charges. There are 2 kinds. There are sustained charges and maintained charges. They both count for difference. They used to not count. Maintained charges used to not count for difference. Those rules changed a couple of years ago. So really, at this point, it's mostly just how you blazon it. If they have the same visual weight as the charge that is holding them, or a little bit less, they are sustained charges. If they have much less visual weight, they are maintained charges. I'm really kind of just going to skip to the examples. There's 2 cases here. Feel free to refer back to the slides. I'm going to try and save time by just moving on here. I pulled these from Oscar. Top left, this is a primary lion, which is maintaining a mace. So that is a maintained secondary charge. All maintained charges are secondary. Top right, these are 2 co-primary birds, which are maintaining between them a wheel. So that is a maintained secondary. Bottom left, you'll see that this is, I believe, a sea goat, which is maintaining a staff. There's a name for this special kind of staff, but I don't remember what it is. It is large in comparison to the primary charge, but it is not the same visual weight. So this is a sustained secondary charge. And in bottom right, this is a motif you see actually quite a bit in Italian armory, which is a tree and then an animal holding the tree. These 2 charges are equivalent in visual weight. They are co-primary charges. So this is a sustained. So this would be infest, a tree sustained by a fox, for example. So let's identify some charge groups. I'm not sure why it's showing like this, but okay. So let's do top charge. Top left. The bar. Oops, I didn't have. So the bars are primary. What are the griffins? This is the audience participation part of the class. Otherwise, I can just click through it if the audience does not want to participate.
Secondary.
They are secondary. That is correct. All right. Are there any other charges on this field? Trick question.
No.
Okay.
No.
How about this one? Bottom left. What is this? What is the scallop?
I think that is a primary because isn't it? It's a semi of plates, making it strewn charges.
That is correct. That's the next question. Is what are the plates?
Oh, but is that a chief or is that a line of a very fancy line of division?
This is Perfas Rayani.
Okay.
Right across the middle of the shield. So this is a field division. So what are the plates?
Those are tertiaries.
Are they on top of another charge?
No, I guess they are secondaries.
Okay. Why are they secondary?
Because they're not on top of other charges and are on the second half of the field? Because it's a field division, right?
Yeah. But they occupy the entire rest of the field. So the plates are also primary.
Oh.
This is there. You don't see this a ton. Generally speaking, you'll see it on either sides of a divided field is the most common way to see it. But the plates are also primary. This is a charge group consisting of one scallop and a semi of plates. So this is an example of a group primary charge. Okay, next. What is the primary charge on on the top armory here?
The chief.
Is the chief a primary charge?
Oh no, it's a.
Is there not a primary charge because it's a tertiary and a secondary?
Correct. This armory has no primary charge. It is field primary. The chief is secondary charge. It's a peripheral ordinary, definitionally a secondary charge, and the key is tertiary. So yeah, this is field primary armory.
Whose armory is that, so I can steal it?
It's Peter Grau von Bremen. He's a friend of mine from the Middle Kingdom. Bremen. It's in fact, this is really good armory. The chief is a chief of pretense. It is the arms of Bremen on a chief. He's got great heraldry. He's a very old friend of mine. The bottom one, what are the primary charges? Are there any primary charges? What are the squirrels? What are the swords?
So I would call those the mouses are primary and the swords are held.
Okay, are they maintained or sustained?
There we go. Those were the words that were not coming to my brain.
Okay.
They are maintained charges.
Correct. And as maintained charges, they are primary,
secondary maintained.
Correct. They are maintained secondaries. All right. Last one. Last slide. What are the charges on the top shield here?
It's primary greyhounds, secondary bend, tertiary lymphads.
I think they're galleons, but either way, what type of charge is a bend?
Well, I was thinking it was it's not properly peripheral because even though it is touching the sides. Oh, I guess so. The bend is a co-primary with the greyhounds.
So the bend is a central ordinary.
Central ordinary, that's the term.
Yep. And by definition, all central ordinaries are
the primary.
Correct. So the bend is primary. What are the greyhounds?
Oh, they're the secondaries.
Correct. And you are correct. The galleons are tertiary. So bend is primary, the hounds are secondary, and the galleons are tertiary. Okay, now I thought this was a fun one. Let's go through the Outlands Kingdom arms. What's the stag?
The primary.
Correct. What's the laurel wreath?
Peripheral.
That's not a type of charge.
It is technically the secondary.
The laurel wreath is a secondary charge. What's the crown?
Would it be considered a sustained secondary?
It's not sustained. It's not being held.
Okay.
It's kind of a weird case. This is an example of essentially it would be like a charge within a charge. Is an example here. And there's actually literally last month, Wreath has a cover letter clarifying how we deal with charges within other charges. And it's if there is a charge within another charge, the center charge is always primary.
Okay.
So what about the crown?
It's technically secondary, but because of its size, it would potentially be construed as a tertiary charge.
Is it on top of another charge?
Okay.
No.
Then it cannot be tertiary.
Hence, it's secondary.
But it's co-secondary?
Yeah. And what about the border?
It's a peripheral ordinary.
Which makes it?
Secondary.
Also secondary.
Correct. So this is an example of a charge with a single of armory with a single primary charge and 3 different secondary charge groups. So the reason why we had to go through charge group theory is because that is how we're going to search, how are we going to check for conflict? Because conflict is fundamentally based off of comparing charge groups. So the first step in conflict checking is understanding what are the charges present in the armory? What are they? And then how do I check them? So first, we're doing a quick step back and talking about what is conflict. So conflict's a modern invention. The SCA the College of Arms acknowledges this in Cena. There's no period concept of conflict. Governing documents, so corpora, requires that armory be sufficiently different from existing registrations to avoid undue confusion. And I believe that's a quote. I copied and pasted, but I forgot to put it in quotation marks. So there's two kinds of undue confusion. They're similar, but there is some degree of nuance. There's confusion of identity, which is your armory appears to claim to be someone else. And there's confusion of relationship, the appearance of a claim to be related to someone else. It may be helpful to take another step back where armory is an image which represents the presence or the being of a person. It also is used for places, but especially before the early modern period, there's some nuance here with like imperial free cities that don't have like governing nobles, but the noble bore the arms of the town or the place that they represented. They were the, king of Bohemia. The arms of Bohemia and the arms of the king were one and the same because they were inseparable as a concept. So the armory represents a person. So when you have the same armory as someone, it is a visual claim to be them to the period mind. And there are certain ways, and we'll talk about this on the next slide, about armory representing a relationship between people. So our concept of conflict comes from preventing confusion between claim to be a person and claim to being related to a person. So how do we determine what constitutes that kind of confusion? And for that, we need to talk about cadency. So cadency is the means by which armory is differenced to show a difference in generation or to show relational difference. So a single step is called a cadency step, and then the set of rules is called cadency. So a cadency is how you difference armory from your parents to show that you are related to your parent, but are not them. So in general, this because medieval European society, which is where the concept of heraldry comes from, was patriarchal. This was usually done with sons, but I've seen it extended in the SCA to children in general, children of any gender. Your first son would bear your arms with a label until you died. Then they would remove the label and they would bear your arms undifferenced. So armory is inherited through the direct patriarchal line. This is generally the English standard. The second bullet here, complex set of rules. And then your second son would bear your arms differenced in some way. They would make a change to show that I am my father's son, but I'm not his oldest son. I'm one step removed from him, so I've made a change to the arms in some way. And then that would then continue through the line. But there's a broad set of rules. They vary in time and place. England had especially by the end of the period, a very codified and almost ossified set of cadency rules. And you'll see this if you look in Fox Davies's book about heraldry, he'll talk about the English rule of cadency. Scotland had a different, similar but different set of ones. It's all about like adding charges to your armory, and certain types of charges means you're the third son or whatever. But it also varied by time and place, and also heraldic tradition. Cadency in Germany and in the German-speaking tradition, the German lands, because Germany didn't exist at the time, was often done through differencing the crest. So in the achievement, you have the arms, you have the helm and mantling, and then the thing on top of the helm is the crest. And so they would difference the crest, and the arms would be undifferentiated. So the SCA's rules are structured around a difference being what was sort of broadly considered a cadency step. And to be clear of conflict, all new armory must be at least 2 cadency steps clear of all other registered armory. What this does is it prevents the appearance of either being someone else or being immediately related to someone else. So I couldn't take, for example, Duke Mortigan's or Earl Mortigan's arms and change the color of his cross to black. That was a cadency step. By a single change of tincture was considered a cadency step. That would be if Mortigan had kids or has kids and wanted to use a cadency system for differentiating his kids' armory. One of his kids could have his same armory with the Vairfield with a black cross if that was clear of conflict. But his kid could do it because he could allow it. I, as a person unrelated to Mortigan, could not do it because that's a claim of being immediately related to him, which would not be allowed. So I find it helpful to explain cadency because conflict isn't random. It's structured. We have come up with a set of rules based off of our understanding of period armory with a specific goal in mind. And I find explaining this is helpful when talking about conflict, both with heralds who are starting out and also submitters. Like, what does a conflict mean? What is that? It's not just like a nebulous term. It has a specific intent in our rules. So there are 2 types of ways of differencing armory. You'll see these terms used. There are DCs and SCs. The old set of rules, which is rolled out, I think close to 20 years ago. I don't remember when CNA came out, but they used to be called the RFS, the Rules for Submission. They were in place for a long time before that. They used CDs and CVDs. There's other terms used, and they're actually specifically called out. If you look in CNA, it'll say it. The terms we use now are SC and DC. A DC is a distinct change, and that is a change to armory which was considered a single cadency step in period. So that is a change that we've recorded difference in armory of immediate relatives. So my arms to my brother's arms would be differenced by a single cadency step. So that's a DC. An SC is a significant change. That is armory which was greater than a cadency step. So that would not have been used to difference armory from immediate relatives. You can think of it as like one SC is worth 2 DCs, but it doesn't really work like that because of the whole idea of cadency. So an SC is this change means it's a whole different family. It is no longer a familial relationship in armory. So to be clear of conflict, you need 1 SC or 2 DCs. So we're going to do a little bit of a walk through Cena. If I had more time for this class, this is a 1-hour class. This is probably in its full form, at least a 2-hour class. So we're really just going to scroll through the rules with a lot of links. And then the attendees will either need to follow up with me and we can do a more detailed walkthrough, and I'm happy to do it. Or click through and read Cena on your own. So standards evaluation for names and armory. These are the rules. When you want a conflict check, you want section A5, which governs armory conflict. Fortunately, there's a lot of examples already in the rules. Again, as I said, will skim over it very quickly because we just don't have time. We have 20 minutes left in this class. But I very, very strongly recommend, if you're a consulting herald, if you're doing conflict checking, you should take the time to scroll through and read the rules in detail in your own time. So we're going to go through the 5 major sections that talk about that are relevant to conflict checking armory. A5, C, D, E, and F. We'll talk through each of those in turn. So A5, C, and D talk about how to compare things. So what blazons you have to consider, specifically we register the image. The M blazon is the image, but we conflict check from the blazon. So you have to consider all reasonable blazons for a specific design. So the example of a pale fimbriated being equivalent to a primary argent pale with a tertiary sable pale, where they both count for difference. or the fimbriation not counting for difference and just as a primary sable pale. Those are both reasonable blazons for that design, which you will need to conflict check independently. Another example is pair chevron throughout, and piles are very, very similar visually. So you should check if you have pair chevron throughout division and a pile, which is a primary, a central ordinary, so a primary charge. You need to check both because you could have a visual conflict. Comparing charge groups. So this is why we went through the exercise of talking through charge group theory. So this is you only check comparable charge groups. So you only check the primary. Excuse me, that should be primary against primary. I will fix that before I upload the notes. You only can compare primary charges to other primary charges, secondary charges to other secondary charges, etc. That's why it's important to, for example, when we're talking about the Outlands armory, that the crown, there is not a this is so small it's like a tertiary. It is on the field. It is a secondary charge group. And the reason we need to know that is because that means we conflict check it against other secondary charges. We don't need to think about tertiary charge groups. If there are tertiary crowns, we don't need to think about them. Or we only need to consider them as under the rules where you would add or remove a charge group. I don't need to compare that charge group against other tertiaries. It also there's specific notes about how to compare them. So how addition and removal of charges counts, specifically when you count the addition and removal charges, like when is it one charge group versus two separate charge groups, for example. And how to compare there's some rules about how to compare secondary and how to compare tertiary charge groups. For example, you only compare tertiary charge groups against so if you have a peripheral ordinary, you'd only compare peripheral the tertiary charge group on that peripheral tertiary charge group against other peripheral ordinaries. You wouldn't compare it against the tertiary charge group on the primary charge, for example. And also, this is actually quite helpful. What is half of a charge group? Because a lot of the rules are about changing the tincture of half of the charge group, changing the type of half the charge group. So we're defining what half the charge group is in here. Basically, all of artistic license is under this one bullet. So A5C3, these are changes that are less than a cadency step and don't count for difference. That is what artistic license is. If artistic license results in a blazable change that counts for difference, not artistic license anymore. You've got new armory. And then standards for visual conflict, comparing visual equivalent blazons, compare the design in its entirety. I've got a big box here. These two sections are basically you cannot blazon your way out of a conflict section. So if you have a conflict, you cannot creatively rearrange the blazon such that there's no conflict. You can blazon your way out of a style problem. You cannot blazon your way out of a conflict. So substantial changes. A5, E, and F are the changes, the sections in the rules which determine what are SCs. So you can get SCs either from change to the primary charge group or changes to the field. Those are the only you cannot get an SC for secondary or tertiary charge groups. You can get an SC for adding or removing the primary charge group or substantial change, and that's defined in the rules. I'm not going to get into it. We don't have time for type, number, arrangement, or posture and orientation. And you can get substantial changes to the field for changing, adding or removing a line of division, changing the direction of division, or for tincture. But that's only for field primary armory. The reason I've included these links, and I will need to update the link to A5E4 before I post the slides. I don't have time to go through these individually, so I provided links to all of those sections. A5, E, and F, this should be, yeah. Oh no, these are duplicates of the slide. I don't know why I have the same slide twice. I'll delete the redundant slide. All right, A5G is distinct changes. So if we have gone through A5E and F and said, okay, there's no SCs in this armory, now we need to count distinct changes. So you can get DCs for changes of the field, adding or removing secondary charge groups, or adding or removing charge groups, so secondary, tertiary, or overall charge groups. Adding or removing a primary charge group is an SC, so that's covered on the previous slide. You can get DCs for change of tincture, change of type, change of number, change of arrangement, or change of posture and orientation. These are all these sections. These sections all have the rules in them. I unfortunately don't have time to go through all of them. In an expanded version of this class, I would, but this is the short version. So, how to conflict check. Understanding that I have blazed through the rules in way less time than they, by rights, should be given. The way you do a conflict check is you go to the ordinary and armorial, so the O and A, which there's a link here. An ordinary is a list of armory which is organized by the charges, so all the lines are together or all the borders are together. An armorial is a list of armory organized by name, so John is followed by Richard is followed by Simon, for example. This class is only going to cover conflict checking the long way, and only with as much time as we have left. This is sometimes called conflict checking by hand or conflict checking individually. We're not going to cover the complex search form. It saves time if you know how to use it, but it's not magic. You do need to know how to use it, and you can get yourself in trouble if you're not aware of how to use the complex search form. That's a different class, which I will teach at some point. You still need to know how to count difference the long way. You need to understand charge group theory. You need to understand the rules in order to use the complex search form effectively and not get caught in a trap. So, quick introduction to the ordinary. So if you're conflict checking the long way, you're going to use the ordinary. So if you go to the O&A, you click the link to the ordinary, it'll take you to this box right here where it says Online SCA Ordinary Master Index. Each piece of armory in the O&A is coded according to its elements. So if you've got, an Argent Stag, there's a specific way of coding that underlies that, so that if you want to know all the stags, you will go to the stags section of the ordinary, and that'll pull up all the armory with stags. Primary, secondary, tertiary. If there's a stag on the armory, it will show up in the ordinary. There are some common charges that are broken up into subsections. So I was going to show lions. What are all the ways we break up lions? Because there's lots of lions. But cats are cats, according to the SCA. There's not a significant, there's no DC for most types of cat. So lions are included under beast-cat, and so there are many of them. So these are how they are broken up in the ordinary. This does mean that, for example, if I have a single sable cat, I will need to check, not just go into cat one sable, but also the posture. And I also, acknowledging that a change of tincture is a DC, I'll also need to check all the other same postured cats in the ordinary. So this is long, especially if you have common charges, but you will get to the right answer if you know what you're doing. So if I were to click A, for example, that would show this is the top of the section for A. So this is what it looks like once you click into the letter. So this is my wildly oversimplified flowchart for conflict checking. So the first step is identify the primary charge group. If there is not a primary charge group, you go to the end of this presentation where it says conflict checking without a primary charge. So first off, assuming you have a primary charges, and most armory does, identify what that primary charge group is. Then you navigate to that charge at the ordinary. So here you find, say you want an abacus. The primary charge is an abacus. You will click A, you'll click abacus. That will pull up all the armor with abaci on it. And then we will compare each existing registration to the armory that you're conflict checking against according to the following flowchart. So basically you have the armory you're conflict checking, and then I will go through, and each line will be an existing registration. Comparing the existing registration to the armory that you are checking, first look, is there an SC? If there's an SC, you are done, move on. Then check, are there two DCs? If there are two DCs, yes, no conflict, you are done. If there are not two DCs, you have a conflict. That's really what there is to it. This is wildly oversimplified. There's a lot of nuance into this, but fundamentally, you're looking, is there an SC? If not, are there two DCs? And then if no, then you have a conflict, and you need to either redesign your armory or seek permission to conflict. So, before we get into some examples, and I do I would like to do a worked example to sort of talk through this, which we probably will have some time for. There are some resources for conflict checking. I highly recommend making use of Appendix L and Appendix M. So the board of directors requires any changes to the rules to be approved by the bod. Any changes to the rules for submission, so to CINA, have to be approved by the bod. But there's more flexibility in precedent, in appendices. So the core rules have to be in appendices, but we can put resources and stuff like that in appendices without needing to go through a full bod review cycle. So there are a bunch of couple years ago, Laurel, I don't remember which Laurel it was, went and started collecting precedents, because you used to have like a lot of random cover letters bookmarked. So I would need to know like what cover letter had all of the conflicts for crosses, like what crosses conflict with other crosses, or how do we do conflict checking for birds? That's a different cover letter. So you'd have to have a bunch of those bookmarked. Now those are all collected into Appendix M. They're not all there, and not everything. So you want to know, like, there are two types of charges called panthers, and then there's natural panthers. How do those conflict? That's not included in Appendix M. That is one for which you would need to do a precedent dive. So a precedent dive is pulling up. There are two places you can go to search for this. The newest one is there's an actual search box on heraldry.sca.org. It's linked here. And you just search through, you just type your search terms in. So I want to know Continental Panther, hit enter, and then scroll until you find like what are the rules which govern, like what things, have there been any registrations of Continental Panthers which mention how they conflict with English Panthers or with natural Panthers, for example. I use that example specifically because I have an example with a Continental Panther in the worked examples here. So sometimes you just kind of have to go look. Is there a DC between a billet and a weaver's tablet, or a delph and a weaver's tablet? They're both squares, or one's billet's a rectangle. Is there a DC there? You have to go look. So you can do a precedent dive. Precedent dive is a little more advanced. Good, like once you get confident as a consulting herald, this is a thing that you should be able to do. But there's a learning process, and it's okay to ask questions and ask for help as you come up to speed and learn how to actually do this. So I've got 3 examples. We're really only going to have time to start one of them. So I have Ghouls 3 Billets Or. I have, I don't know why, I have Argent 3 Monkeys Passant within a border and Grailed Sable. And I have Vert Continental Panther Rampant Or Incensed Ghouls and a Chief Or. Which one do you want to do? We have time for one of them. Someone pick one. Okay, I'm going to pick the Panthers one. So, since no one chimed in, we're going to do Panthers. So, we are going to... Can you all see my... Can you just see the work example, or can you see the Google tab that I have just opened?
Cannot see.
We cannot see the Google tab.
Okay, let me... Okay, well, let's stop sharing and reshare. I thought I was showing my whole screen. Must have been. Okay, here we go. Now you're showing my whole screen. Okay, so we're going to go to oanda.sca.org, and we're going to go to the ordinary. And so this armory it's a Continental Panther. So there's 2 types of Panthers. There is a Continental Panther, which is a beast with a lion's tail, a horse's head, eagle's forelimbs, lion's limbs. It is always breathing fire. The incensing is the breathing fire. And then there is a more cat-like one, which has spots. That is an English Panther, or just a Panther. And then there is a natural panther, which we usually blazon as an ounce, which is like an actual like big cat panther, which does not have spots. So we are going to search for. We want a panther, so we're going to go to P. So panther is coded under monster panther and beast cat. So I am just going to we're going to pull up the precedent so I can show you all how to do it. So we want to go, it's under rules? No. Guides? No. Archives? Yes. Okay. You want to go archives. Archives, search the letter of acceptances and returns. That's how you get to it. And so we're going to search for, let's say, Continental Panther English. That should pull up Continental Panthers. And I should have bookmarked this. So, difference. And it's a pretty old one. Here we go. Okay. Is it? I'm used to using the morseless one, but I'm trying to be better about using the one that we've provided. Thought it was in 2009. See, this is the glamour part about doing November 2006. So here we have. So sometimes it'll see. All right. See the November 2006 cover letter for a discussion of the difference between English, Continental, and Natural Panthers. So, November 2006. Carolyn, could you mute yourself? We're hearing a car in the background.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, I'm not sharing. Oh, it's because it's not. It's only. All right. This is very glamorous. So we're just going to go to archives. LAR's November 2006 cover letter. Panthers. Big long discussion about how to do Panthers. In the summary, it will say, we will henceforth granted CD, which is equivalent to a DC, between a standard panther and a continental panther, and either monster will have a CD from an unspotted natural panther. So if we are, we go here, we go panther, monster panther, monster panther. Okay, and so there are 112 panthers. So now we need to start conflict checking. So for starters, we know of a DC between any panther. So this is a continental panther. So unless it has the word continental, or sometimes it says German, you have one DC. So in this case, we do not have a DC for change in primary charge type. It's the same tincture, but it is fieldless. So we have one DC for fieldlessness. There's no SC. And it is wearing a coronet argent. So what would that coronet be in terms of a charge group?
Maintained.
Yes, it would be effectively a maintain. No. Yeah, I think it'd be either maintain secondary or tertiary, depending on how it's blazoned. But yeah, so it's still a secondary charge or a tertiary charge. So there's a second DC. Also, no chief. So these two, there's no conflict with the first one. So move on to the next one. A Panther Courant facing Dexter Argent. A DC for fieldlessness. And then there is a DC for facing. So it is facing the opposite direction. So this is facing Wait, no, facing Dexter. So there is no. I'm not sure why it would say facing Dexter because Dexter's the default. Um, but it is Argent. So there's a second DC for Tincture. Moving on. A Panther Passant. This is also Courant. So you have another DC for for posture. A Panther Passant. So you have immediately 3 DCs for fieldlessness, type of Panther, posture. Fieldlessness, type of Panther, moving on. Fieldlessness, type of Panther, fieldless type of Panther, fieldless, and then we can kind of just scroll down. Unless it's fieldness with a Continental Panther, here's fieldness with a winged Continental Panther. And then as you some precedents, you'll just sort of learn. Wings are worth a DC. So adding or removing wings are a DC. So it's a Continental Panther, but there's wings. So I don't care about anything else. I can move on. I've counted 2 DCs. As a useful exercise when you're learning how to conflict check, it is a useful exercise to count all of the DCs. But if you're in a hurry, you just count them all. So unfortunately, we are over time. So I'm going to do let me check the schedule. Is it lunch now or is there someone else now? Okay, so we have 30 minutes. There's 30 minutes for lunch. If you want to drop for lunch, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to go over by about 10 minutes to do a little bit more walking through conflict checking. A Chevron is a primary charge. You have an SC for change of primary charge. Moving on. Oak Leaf, SC. Now we have another Panther. But it's an Argent field. The Panther is Sable, and it's a type of Panther. So there's automatically 3 DCs. Moving on. Chevron, SC. Fret, SC. Argent, a Panther Rampant. So same primary charge, same posture, but different field. And because it's an Argent field, our Panther is Ore, so this Panther will definitionally have to be a color, so there's no conflict. Argent, a Pile, SC for primary. Argent, impale 2 Continental Panthers. If we go to, in fact, fortunately, actually, let's put these up next to each other. Because we can, if we go to Armory Conflict, we can go down to the SC. So this is SCs for primary charge group, change of number of the primary charge group. So you can get an SC per number, and this convenient table here tells you what number. So we have 1 Panther in ours. This one has 2. So there is an SC for number between 1 and 2 primary charges. So no conflict. Argent on a Bend, clear. Argent on a Chief. So when it's Argent on a Chief, this means it's field primary, because otherwise the primary charge would be blazoned first. So field primary, which means you have an SC for removing the primary charge group. Argent 3 Panthers, SC for number. Argent 2 Panthers, SC for number. Argent, a Continental Panther, Azure, a Continental Panther Rampant Argent. If it's same primary charge, SC, assume it DC for field tincture, DC for Panther tincture. Moving on. Argent, Azure, a Continental Panther Rampant Gardent within a border Rayany Ore. Okay, so now let's think about this one. So we're going to make this a little smaller so we can compare about it. So who wants to think through the DCs here? So do you want me to talk through this, or does anyone want to talk through it themselves? I'm happy to do either.
You have a DC for change of color of the fields.
Correct.
You have a DC for type of peripheral secondary.
Correct.
Which is 2.
That is 2. Are there any others?
Rampant. I don't think you have a DC for Rampant Gardant because it's just a position of the head.
That's correct.
I don't think that grants a DC.
Correct.
You would
Head
also
facing
have a
is not
DC. You'd also have a DC for Ray and E versus Plainline.
Do you though?
I mean, you wouldn't normally compare them because they're a type of change of ordinary. But a complex line versus a straight line is something that provides a DC.
Ish. That's actually one of the things I specifically, that why I chose this specific example. So, change of type of change within a charge group, change of type within a charge group. So this is seen at A5G4. The change in type of at least half of a charge group is a distinct change. Only one distinct change will be given for change of type within a single charge group, though multiple distinct changes can be given for changes of type of multiple charge groups. The edges of ordinaries and similar geometric charges have a style, either plate line or complex. These styles are part of the type of charge. So there is only one DC for changing from a border rainy to a plain line chief. If it were a border rainy versus a plain line border, you'd have a DC for the line type under change of type. Or if it were a plain line chief versus a rainy chief, you'd have a change of type. Or plain line to plain line, you'd have a change of type. But from plain line border or plain line chief to rainy border is only one DC for change of type. I actually found out that's one I learned about more recently than I am comfortable admitting. So yeah, 2 DCs, one for field, one for type of secondary, but otherwise no conflict. And then the rampant to sinister gets you an extra DC. A pale Armanois, SC for primary charge. Azure a panther, different field, clear. Azure a panther, different field, different panther, same here. Azure a sea panther. You get a DC for type of sea panther because adding the tail counts for half of the type of charge. So that's a DC for change of type. Azure in bend 3 German panthers. So they are rampant, but they are conturny. You have a DC for field, but you also have an SC for number. So DC, an SC for number. Azure on a bend is an SC, bend SC, pile SC, on a pile SC. Azure 3 panthers, SC for number. Counter ermine a panther passant, so field and panther, field and type of panther. Counter vary Orin ghouls, so one for the field. A continental panther rampant 2 sinister, so same type of charge, but you get one for facing and one for removing the chief. Ermine a continental panther rampant ghouls, one for field, one for tincture. Ermine a winged continental panther, so one for field, one for wings. Ghoul's ability or a continental panther rampant argent, so one for field, one for change of type of secondary charge group, so going from billets to a chief, and one for tincture of the panther. The incensing, the breathing flames, I don't think that's worth a DC, so I'm not counting it. If you come up with one where the only difference is in the tincture of the incensing, then you can check it. Do a precedent dive to see if incensing is worth difference. But if you're not sure, you can just ignore it and then conflict check. And then anything that's too close, you can do a precedent dive just in if you need to for the extra little detail.
I'm pretty sure the flames don't count at all.
Yeah,
unless you're comparing against something else that has flames.
Yeah, I agree. Flames are a part of the type of charge. So a continental panther is by definition incensed. It definitionally has flames coming out of its mouth. But yeah, like Kalita just said, pretty sure it doesn't count for difference. But there are things where you're like, I'm not sure if this counts for difference. So I'm going to conflict check assuming it doesn't. And then if it's clear, I'm good. And then if it does count for difference, you get an extra point. But if you do find a conflict, then you can do the extra precedent dive to find the extra step. Okay, we've gone the extra 10 minutes over. So, and then basically the way you conflict check the long way is you just keep doing this. You do this until you either confirm it's clear or find no conflict. And this is why, one of the reasons why it is easiest to clear conflict if you have a primary charge that is not a common one. So like a tool or not an especially common animal. Like there are certain monsters which have not had a ton of registrations. There are not a ton of continental panthers, antelopes, chimeras, not a ton of them. So if you have a less common primary charge, this is something that Ethelwolf will get into in his class coming up later, which is tips for designing armory and beating conflict checks. That's one of the ways you can do that is by coming up with a less common primary charge. Okay, I have now gone my 11 minutes over. Does anyone have any questions before I tell Jose he can stop sharing and take his lunch break? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for sticking around. I will work on improving this class for the future. I recognize it was a little dry. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about conflict checking. I think I'm pretty good at it. So I'm often very happy to put a second pair of eyes on a conflict check for you. And I know who to go to if there's really niche cases. I know really, really good conflict checking heralds. So good luck with your conflict checks going forward. And thanks for coming.